This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Gunmen abduct an unknown number of students in northern Nigeria. South Africa targets healthcare workers as it rolls out its COVID-19 vaccinations with Johnson & Johnson's single-dose vaccine. And Libyans mark the 10th anniversary since the ouster of Muammar Gaddafi, but challenges lie ahead in the search for peace. Hello and welcome. You're watching Africa Live. We're coming to you live from Nairobi. I'm Hannah Viviers, and here with the latest in business is Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in business news. Zambia becomes only the second country in the world to raise rates amidst the economic fallout from the COVID-19 pandemic. And Nigeria's public debt load has hit a record level of $92 billion. We'll have the details on those stories and lots more coming your way in the course of the hour. For now, let's start with the latest in current affairs with Hannah.
Thanks, Rama. We'll see you in a bit. Well, let's begin in northern Nigeria, where gunmen have abducted an unknown number of students and staff at a school in Niger State. President Muhammadu Buhari has condemned the raid and dispatched security chiefs to coordinate operations to rescue the abducted students. From Abuja, here is Filihaza with the details.
According to locals, bandits dressed in military uniforms stormed the government science college in Kagara in the early hours of Wednesday. They overpowered the security guards and whisked away an unknown number of students. The science school has about 1,000 students, and some teachers and their family members who reside at the college were also said to have been abducted by the gunmen. A head count is being conducted at the school to ascertain the actual number of people missing. Security agencies have been patrolling the area in an attempt to track the bandits, while military aircraft are being used to try and identify the location of the students. This latest abduction comes 3 months after more than 300 schoolboys were abducted by gunmen in Katsina, which is less than 500 kilometers from Niger State. After several efforts by the government, those students were rescued. President Muhammadu Buhari in January replaced his heads of military and urged the new commanders to step up the offensive against criminals terrorizing the country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
Zanzibar's first Vice President Saif Sharif Hamad has died, aged 77. Hamad was recently hospitalized after contracting COVID-19. Zanzibar's President Hussein Mwinyi has announced 7 days of mourning with the flag flown at half-mast. Saif was the leading opposition figure in Zanzibar. The cause of his death has not yet been made public. Meanwhile, Tanzania's President John Magufuli has sent a message of condolence to President Mwinyi and the people of Zanzibar. Well, for more on this, we're now joined by Daniel Kija, who is in Dar es Salaam. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us. Zanzibar in mourning. What more can you tell us, Daniel?
Hi, Hannah. I can tell you that it is not just Zanzibar that is in mourning, but the whole of Tanzania and perhaps East Africa, because of the impact that the late Maalim Saif Sharif Hamad has built. 77 years, statesman. He has been a man who has led the opposition, like you said, for Zanzibar for many years, and now was part of the Zanzibar government and leadership. Now, we do know that on February 9th, he was hospitalized, and his party, the ACT Wazalendo party, issued a statement that he had contracted COVID-19. He was moved to Tanzania's biggest hospital, Muhimbili, in Dar es Salaam, and that is where he passed away today at around 11:26 a.m. President Hussein Mwinyi did announce this in the afternoon, and he did say that the country would be mourning for 7 days. And also mainland President John Pombe Magufuli echoed the same sentiments, sending condolences to the people of Zanzibar and the people of Tanzania, but also in turn issuing 3 days of mourning for the loss of such an important statesman and leader for Zanzibar. There was a timetable for his burial, because he is a Muslim and the burial plans have been expedited. So we do know that tomorrow the late Vice President, Zanzibar's Vice President, will be laid to rest. The activities, the procedures of saying goodbye and last respects will start mid-afternoon. In Pemba Island, part of Zanzibar, is where his body will be laid to rest. So indeed, a sad day for Tanzanians, a sad day for Zanzibarians, and perhaps a sad day for East Africans for the loss of such an important man.
Daniel, thank you so much for that. Daniel Kijo speaking to us from Dar es Salaam. Well, South Africa has begun its mass COVID-19 vaccination campaign. President Cyril Ramaphosa was among the first people to receive the Johnson & Johnson shot alongside healthcare workers in Cape Town. President Ramaphosa's inoculation aims to demonstrate his government's confidence in the doses. South Africa switched to the one-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine after pausing the rollout of AstraZeneca's two-dose vaccine this month. Meanwhile, Zimbabwe has confirmed that South Africa's COVID-19, the South Africa COVID-19 variant now makes up more than 60% of cases in that country. This makes Zimbabwe the first nation outside South Africa to confirm the variant as a dominant role. Reporting from Harare, here's Farai Mwakutuya.
Zimbabwe's government announced Tuesday that results of genomic sequencing indicate that the type of COVID-19 virus the country was dealing with in 2020 had receded, and that the South African variant accounts for 61% of infections. It said prevention and control measures would be stepped up to deal with the faster spreading and deadlier variant. It had been widely expected that the South African variant was prevalent here after a spike in cases and fatalities experienced after thousands of migrant workers returned from Zimbabwe's southern neighbor for the Christmas holidays. The emergence of the now dominant variant will not affect the launch of a national vaccination drive, which is set for Thursday. Zimbabwe received its first 200,000 doses of the Sinopharm vaccine from China on Monday and plans to begin inoculating frontline health workers and security forces. A Ministry of Health official said the first phase of vaccinations will assess the vaccine's effectiveness against the South African variant. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
The Egyptian Health Ministry has prioritized inoculating medical staff treating COVID-19 cases in its ongoing vaccination drive. Medical teams treating other contagious and respiratory diseases are next in line. However, government officials have been surprised to see that more than 50% of medical workers are refusing to take the jab. CGTN's Adel Muruki has more from Cairo.
Doctors on the front line of the COVID-19 pandemic have been given priority in the ongoing vaccinations in Egypt. But after almost 3 weeks of rolling out the jab, the government says more than 50% of the doctors are refusing to get the vaccine.
It is concerning to see medical staff widely rejecting to get vaccinated. The authorities must understand why. One of the main reasons is the consent form that is required to get the vaccine. It says that neither the Ministry of Health nor the producer and the importing company will be held responsible for any complications or side effects from the jab. That's made most doctors worry.
Because all vaccines only have approval for emergency use, the Egyptian Doctors Union has left the medical staff to decide whether to take the jab or not. Some believe if the terms on the consent form are more reassuring, more doctors might get vaccinated.
Doctors in general, to some extent, look at the Ministry of Health with suspicion. Their fundamental needs of routine PCR testing and other care have not been met, while sports tournaments get daily PCR tests. So doctors feel the ministry is not taking good care of them, which has created a kind of mistrust.
Dr. Gamal Shaban is an advocate for the COVID-19 vaccinations. Since Egypt started vaccinations for doctors, he's been launching online campaigns encouraging his colleagues to get the jab.
The consent form has harsh terms, but doctors know the science. Egyptian doctors have sustained the unbearable under the pandemic. They have sacrificed a lot to serve the people, I'm sad to see many now are hindering the efforts to curb the pandemic. They must be role models. They must be the ones urging people to take the vaccine, not avoid it.
So far, Egypt has reported nearly 170,000 COVID-19 cases and more than 10,000 deaths. At least 370 doctors have died from the disease. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
As African countries begin rolling out vaccination drives, the emergence of COVID-19 variants remain a challenge. Earlier, we spoke with the director of Africa CDC, Dr. John Nkekasong, about the impact of the variants on immunization campaigns.
The emergence of COVID-19 variant means a lot for the whole world, not just for Africa. But in Africa, it means that as we are beginning to see that it limits the possibilities of using certain vaccines in a certain context, like the current discussion that we are having around the AstraZeneca vaccine for its use in South Africa. And I think because of the variants that were identified there, and that became predominant. And I really want to underline the word predominant variants because the narrative should not be that if you pick one individual with that variant strain in a country, then the vaccine cannot be used in that country. That is not accurate. You really have to have a systematic systematic analysis of the variant over time to document that the variant has become a predominant variant that will impact a certain vaccine. So I think that is what it means. It means that we have to monitor them. I mean, it poses an additional layer of analysis on the continent. Just besides testing, we need to analyze through genetic sequencing to understand what kind of variants or strains are circulating in each country. We first of all, I think we have to appreciate the international cooperation and solidarity that is going on around the COVAX facility, which is a mechanism that was put in very, very, very early on. But unfortunately, both efforts that have been put in place either through the COVAX facility or through regional approaches have been hindered because rich countries have purchased these vaccines advance and procure large doses of the vaccines that even if you have the money, you cannot necessarily get the vaccines. So I think that becomes a serious challenge for a timely access to immunizing people. So I like to assure the citizens of Africa that these vaccines are very safe. And they've gone through a very rigorous process, and you have your own public health agencies like the World Health Organization, the Africa Centers for Disease Control, and local authorities watching over the safety-ness of these vaccines. So the vaccines are very safe.
A new coronavirus variant linked to Southern California has spread to other countries. It's now being detected in nearly 20 U.S. states and 6 other nations. The Cal.20C strain was first identified last summer and re-emerged in recent months. Now California is working to boost vaccination efforts while controlling infections. DSTV Sun reports from Los Angeles.
California's health experts had been baffled by the unexpected surge in COVID-19 cases late last year. It was especially vexing in a state that had taken some of the strictest coronavirus measures since the beginning of the pandemic. Researchers in Southern California have discovered that a homegrown variant of COVID-19 could be responsible for the uncontrolled spread.
And then when we look specifically over the holidays, so when we start to see the emergence of this strain, is both in California, in the state we see it emerge, and it's about 20% now. And in Southern California specifically, knowing that, we have over 1 million cases now in California, but we were really struck hard during the holidays in Los Angeles and Southern California. When we look in those populations, we see it around 40% now.
The Los Angeles County Public Health Lab is performing genomic sequencing on more than 150 samples of the coronavirus every week. These bars indicate the changes in the DNA of each sample compared to the original strain of COVID-19. Similar to some of the other variants discovered globally, Cal-20C is said to be more contagious, but not necessarily more severe in causing sickness.
The faster we can get the vaccine rolled out, the less we have to worry about strains. What's known about the UK strain so far is reassuring that most of the vaccines are still working very well for that, and we hope, and we are currently investigating making sure that that's the same for the California strain.
While scientists look for answers, protective measures and mass immunization efforts are the only tools they have for now.
Nice to see you.
During a visit to a new vaccination center in San Francisco on Friday, California's governor spoke about the state efforts to increase capacity amid vaccine shortages.
And while the administration's done a very admirable job procuring more Pfizer and Moderna vaccines to the tune of 200+ million, those vaccines are not available until later in the summer, likely, as the administration announced yesterday, in July.
Over the past week, the U.S. has seen a promising decline in the number of its new coronavirus cases, but several variants from around the world, along with the Cal-20C, continue to threaten that progress. It is Tianshan, CGTN, Los Angeles.
Well, it's time now for us to take a short break and return. More news, including Libyans mark the 10th anniversary since the ouster of Muammar Gaddafi, but challenges lie ahead in the search for peace.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Tunis,
Syria,
Cuba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia,
Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. You're watching Africa Live. Libya is marking 10 years since its 2011 uprising, completing a decade of unrest since Libyans revolted against former President Muammar Gaddafi. A new interim government is set to steer the country to elections in December. Libyans hope recent peace efforts will unite the country. CGTN's Robert Nagila tells us more.
10 years after former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi was deposed from power, there's a cautious optimism amongst Libyans that the conflict that has raged since then may soon be over. Following UN-sponsored talks in Geneva, a new interim government is set to steer the country to elections in December, and many Libyans are optimistic about the future. Back then, Osama Ali Al-Ghuri, an unemployed graduate from Benghazi and a friend, joined the assault on Tripoli when Gaddafi's forces engaged them.
I was shot in the leg while in the place we were in, which was under a hill, and things fell on it. So the injury was in the pelvis and I sustained a hit to the stomach.
His comrade was killed and he ended up in a wheelchair, paralyzed from the waist down. Like many Libyans, he is critical of those who emerged as leaders in 2011.
The revolution was stolen from the honorable. The honorable we speak about are now buried. Those leading this period are the filthy ones who didn't want the country.
In Misrata, Malik Salim Al-Meje, then 20, joined the fighting in 2011 after his city was attacked by Gaddafi's forces. Like Osama, he blames Libya's post-revolutionary leaders for failing to unite the country.
We had hoped that Libya would be in a better position in terms of education, infrastructure, stability from all aspects. After 10 years, wars remain, and the politicians that were entrusted with the task were not up to the standard.
In Tripoli, Hisham al-Windi was among the first fighters to storm Gaddafi's Tripoli compound. Unlike many revolutionary fighters, his father was a diplomat and their family well off. He briefly gained international fame as one of the faces of the uprising after he was interviewed wearing Gaddafi's military hat.
I entered the home of Muammar Gaddafi and found his personal belongings, which I took and which I shall return to the Libyan state when there is a stable government.
He now works in Tunis and is hopeful of change. Robert Makila, CGTN, Nairobi, Kenya.
The UN Secretary General's new special envoy to Libya, Cuba, has praised Tunisia for its role in the achievement of recent political agreements in Libya. He thanked Tunisia for hosting the first Libyan political dialogue forum in November of 2020. Adnan Shuashi tells us more.
The head of the United Nations support mission in Libya met with Tunisian President Kais Saied at the Carthage Palace. Yankubis expressed his willingness to continue consultations and coordination with Tunisia to reach a final political solution to the Libyan crisis.
I also expressed the gratitude of myself and on behalf of the United Nations for a strong support that Tunisia has been providing and is providing to the people of Libya in their search for better future, for stability, prosperity, safety, sovereignty and unity that hopefully is coming.
Foreign Minister Othman Jarandi said Tunisia has backed Libyans in their quest for a peaceful political settlement. He pledged that Tunis will remain supportive of inter-Libyan dialogue to foster unity and achieve true reconciliation.
The head of state reaffirmed Tunisia's endless support to the brotherly Libya to help it reach the final stage of the roadmap which has been agreed upon. The president expressed Tunisia's willingness to offer guidance and counseling to Libyans.
Jarandi also noted that stability in Libya has a direct impact on the situation in the region. He warned that a destabilized Libya would lead to unrest in several neighboring countries.
Tunisia stands by the United Nations, the Libyan state and the people until Libya returns to the path of stable countries in the region, so that stability reigns throughout our region in North Africa in general, as well as the Mediterranean area.
The UN Secretary General Special Envoy to Libya says that Libyan Prime Minister-designate Abdulhamid Mohammed Dbeiba plans to form an inclusive cabinet within the timeline set by the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum roadmap adopted in Tunis. The Tunisian president says the success of the UN mission in Libya represents a success for Libya, Tunisia and the entire region. Kais Saied added that Libya is starting the process of transition from provisional international legitimacy to permanent international legitimacy. Adnan Shawashi, CGTN, Tunis.
The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees and several civil society organizations say the number of refugees and asylum seekers in Tunisia is on the rise. They say that by January this year, 6,500 people had sought refuge in Tunisia. This is compared to the 6,200 people in 2019. Adnan Shuashi reports.
The Arab Institute for Human Rights and the National Authority to Combat Trafficking in Persons are unhappy about the absence of laws protecting refugees in Tunisia.
We have many nationalities, especially Syrians, Cote d'Ivoire and sub-Saharan countries. In addition, refugees and asylum seekers from Eritrea, Sudan as well as Yemenis and Iraqis.
National human rights organizations have published a guide to coordinate actions to protect refugees and asylum seekers.
In partnership with many ministries and rights groups, we've put in place practical measures to protect refugees and asylum seekers. The Tunisian Social Affairs Department agreed to grant this vulnerable population the right to register for social security and all related services. This is an important achievement.
Oussama Sghayr is a Tunisian MP and a former political refugee in Europe. The member of the Parliamentary Commission on Rights and Freedoms has urged the Health Ministry to vaccinate refugees and asylum seekers against COVID-19.
The access to healthcare as well as the coronavirus vaccine is a right. Just like all Tunisian citizens, refugees and asylum seekers will be vaccinated during the pandemic. We will discuss this project with the government in order to facilitate this operation.
According to the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, Tunisia has some 100 refugees and asylum seekers who are over 60 years old, while 600 others suffer from chronic illnesses. They are staying at the specialized host centers and are under constant medical supervision. Tunisian authorities have revealed that out of 6,700 refugees and asylum seekers, 6 confirmed cases of coronavirus infections had been recorded in January and February 2021, as well as 2 deaths. The 2 victims were already suffering from other diseases. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Nigeria's former finance minister Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was on Monday confirmed as the Director General of the World Trade Organization. Her appointment marks the first time a woman and an African will head the global body. It's also the culmination of a long-drawn process to recruit a new head of the WTO. CGTN's Deji Badmore says more on the new WTO Director General and what her appointment means for Africa.
Her journey to the top of the WTO has been a remarkable one. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala has come a long way after holding several high-profile positions both at the global stage and in her home country, Nigeria. She served as Nigeria's finance minister twice, was a managing director of the World Bank, and also a head of the Global Vaccine Alliance, Gavi. And now she's setting a record as the first woman and first African to head the WTO. She says the import of it all is not lost on her.
I absolutely do feel an additional burden. I can't lie about that. Being the first woman and the first African means that one really has to perform. I've always said these are wonderful things. It's groundbreaking. All credit to members for electing me and making that history. But the bottom line is that if I want to really make Africa and women proud, I have to produce results. And that's where my mind is at now.
Across Nigeria and Africa, many are celebrating her for landing the WTO top job.
First African, first woman, that is significant enough. I mean, and that's why everybody has been celebrating her, even beyond the African continent. And especially in a period where people feel that women should be allowed to play more significant roles in society. Of course, she comes fully qualified. She's not the WTO DG on the basis of being a woman, but on the basis of her qualification for the position of a Director General of the World Trade Organization.
In Africa, expectations on her remain high, especially given the recent launch of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area.
We are now going to depend on her to guide us in the implementation of our Africa Free Trade Area, because other trading blocs may be having issues with us in what we are trying to do. Because when you have this our agreement, what we'll do is that we'll waive duty among ourselves, all right? Within the WTO, there's what they call MFM, which is the most favored nation clause that says all members should be treated the same. But the African members are treating themselves the same, but not the others. So some may take us to court there and then say that we are discriminating against them.
Africans generally have in Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala somebody who will represent them well, who would also take on African issues. I quite believe that she would not want to leave that job without at least impacting positively, getting something for Africa in the whole mix of the World Trade Organization. Even though it's a tough ask, but I think she will do her best.
When the euphoria eventually dies down and she begins work on March the 1st, Okonjo-Iweala faces the difficult task of uniting the members of the WTO so that the organization could begin to work towards more transparent and open global trade. Deji Badmore, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And now for a recap of some of the top stories we've been following. Let's begin in northern Nigeria, where gunmen have abducted an unknown number of students and staff at a school in Niger State. President Muhammadu Buhari has condemned the raid and dispatched security chiefs to coordinate operations to rescue the abducted students. This latest abduction comes 3 months after more than 300 schoolboys were abducted by gunmen in Katsina, which is less than 500 kilometers from Niger State. South Africa has begun its mass COVID-19 vaccination campaign. President Cyril Ramaphosa was among the first people to receive the Johnson & Johnson shot alongside healthcare workers in Cape Town. President Ramaphosa's inoculation aims to demonstrate his government's confidence in the doses. South Africa switched to one-shot Johnson & Johnson vaccine after pausing the rollout of AstraZeneca's 2-dose vaccine this month. Zanzibar's first Vice President Sharif Hamad has died aged 77. Hamad was recently hospitalized after contracting COVID-19. The country's President Hussein Mwinyi has announced 7 days of mourning with the flag flown at half-mast. Saif was the leading opposition figure in Zanzibar. The cause of his death has not yet been made public. Meanwhile, Tanzania's President John Magufuli has sent a message of condolence to President Mwinyi and the people of Zanzibar. Those are stories making headlines this hour. Let's now take a look at what's happening in the world of business with Rama.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Here's what's coming up in business news. Zambia becomes the second country globally to raise rates amidst COVID-19's economic fallout. And Nigeria's public debt load has hit a record level of $92 billion.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's start on the continent's second largest copper producer. Zambia has become the second country in the world to raise its benchmark lending rates this year as it seeks to bring down spiraling inflation that is now at a 5-year high. The Monetary Policy Committee over there lifted the policy rate by about 50 basis points to 8.5%. This is the first increase since November 2019, and it follows tightening by its eastern neighbor Mozambique last month. The MPC's decision was called a deliberate act of balancing between the need to fight inflation on one hand, but also the need to prop up economic activity. And it came after 2 days of deliberations. The central bank, it says, stands ready to tighten policy further, with inflation seen moving even further from the bank's range of between 6 to 8% over the next 2 years. To West Africa now, where Nigeria's total public debt load has risen to an all-time high of $92 billion. The country has been borrowing at relatively high rates over the last 60 months, partly to invest in infrastructure. But experts there are arguing that if this borrowing spree continues, especially amidst the current economic realities of low growth, stubbornly high unemployment and a limited tax revenue base, the country may eventually end up in a debt crisis. Phil Ihaza has the details from Abuja.
Temple Robert powers his generator to try and ensure a steady power supply. It's an example of Nigeria's infrastructure challenges. He says he's racked up huge losses trying to cope with unreliable electricity.
I've been a barber for the past 12 years, and the electricity supply in this area is very poor, and I use 60 or 50% of my daily income to buy fuel to power my gen.
Nigeria's government says it requires $3 trillion to fix its infrastructure, from electricity to roads and housing. Within the last 5 years, it has increased its borrowing to fix the country's ailing infrastructure, and now the total debt profile is $92 billion, the highest level ever. Yet, the government plans to borrow an additional $11 billion this year, saying the GDP to debt ratio is still at a safe level of less than 40%. But experts warn that if the trend of borrowing continues, a debt crisis looms.
You don't use GDP to service your debt, you use revenue to service your debts. Now, with this metric, we are doing very poorly. Before the pandemic, it was about 60% we're using about 60% of our revenue to service our debts. And the estimates for 2020, it shows that we're going to be using about 96% of our revenue to service our debts based on IMF estimates.
Since September, economic activities have been picking up after a 6-month lockdown due to COVID-19. And the government says it's now on course to generate more revenue to service its loans.
It's also good news for Nigeria's economy that oil prices have risen to more than $60 a barrel. But experts say the country won't be able to pay down its debt on oil revenue alone.
So apart from the magnitude, right, we need to be exporting an increased number of goods, not just oil, because don't forget that it's the foreign exchange that is being used to service the debts, and your major source of foreign exchange is oil.
President Buhari says his administration is determined to diversify the economy and create a better environment for small businesses before the end of his tenure in 2023. If achieved, it could see businesses like temples cut their losses and help the country generate more revenue to pay back its debts. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
On to North Africa, where authorities in Egypt are looking to introduce a fleet of electric cars, and a move designed to gradually replace the thousands of unlicensed, mostly two-stroke rickshaws which roam the cities. At least 45% of the components that will make up these electric vehicles will be made locally. The finished items will go on sale at relatively low costs to encourage the speedy replacement of these older, often heavily polluting rickshaws. From Cairo, here's Yasser Hakim.
The auto rickshaw, known as the tuk-tuk in Egypt, is a common mode of transport. There are more than 500,000 that have been licensed to operate, but experts say there are more than 1.5 million roaming the country's streets. Although they're suitable for most poor and overpopulated neighborhoods, there have been plans by the government to ban the tricycled vehicles.
They started to spread in Egypt in 2009 and anyone could operate them. The problem of tuk-tuks is that most are not licensed. A lot of social issues have increased with the presence of tuk-tuks, including kidnappings, theft, underage drivers and traffic jams.
The government is now offering an alternative, which essentially is an electric rickshaw introduced by a partnership of the state-owned entities with the private sector Dulaybat Egypt that will see the commissioning of electric cars.
We have now on hand 3 main versions, one with 3 wheels, one with 3 wheels adjusted or amended version, and the third one was 4 wheels. It's like a 4x2 light car. The minimum or the limited speed of all of those cars will not exceed 80 kilometers per hour. The electric cars, we are talking about a non-polluted transportation mean. Pollution is almost zero. It's not almost, it's zero actually. And we are also talking about a very limited budget for maintenance. We are talking about no more petrol needed, no more oil needed, because the nature of manufacturing for these cars are basically based on the battery itself. So it has nothing to do with any kind of pollution or expected pollution. Moreover, it's 75% less of maintenance cost and running cost, mainly running cost, comparing to the other ones. And this is, of course, something very competitive, I believe.
Vehicles will be produced using 45% local components. In spite of the advantages posed by use of electric vehicles, some experts fear the rickshaws might not hit the ground running.
Any means of transport with electricity is an expensive one. Imagine if the old traditional tuk-tuk cost 65,000 Egyptian pounds. Electric rickshaws will be more expensive. Poor people buy tuk-tuks. The first problem is, for example, where are the maintenance centers? If the battery is damaged, where will the owner replace it?
The manufacturers, however, say they are addressing these concerns.
We are targeting at the beginning 28 centers for maintenance and also for trainings and for charging centers to this project. We are targeting actually 1 million light car. We are also targeting a very competitive prices because still now we are still negotiating with the government whether it will be subsidized by the government or not, and they are planning to do this for serving the people or for serving the limited income people or the poor. Exclusively to you, we are targeting 35 for the three-wheel model, the least version, then 45,000, then 55, and for the highest version, this for many 4x2 car, it will be 80,000.
The locally assembled electric tuk-tuk is expected to hit the streets mid-2021. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
Into the world of cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin still continues its blistering rally. It actually crossed the $51,000 mark today, and it's been pretty much above that for most of the day as well. Bitcoin's value has gone up by nearly 70% so far this year. It's recently gotten a boost from large firms. Just last week, Tesla said it bought $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin, and it plans to accept the currency as payment for its products. MasterCard also announced plans to open up its network to some cryptocurrencies. The online payment platform PayPal has also made moves to support cryptocurrency use as well. One last story for you. This is from Cuba. The country is expanding its private sector, and it says that this will provide thousands with new employment opportunities. It's part of the latest efforts by Havana to boost the island's struggling economy. CGTN's Luis Chirino reports.
The Cuban government announced this month that private work will be allowed in most sectors of its economy. The measure will impact more than 2,000 activities. Private work had been limited to a small list of 127 sectors set by Havana since 2010. Officials say the expansion of private employment will increase opportunities. Cuba will retain its free education, healthcare, and other services, which will not be open to the private sector. Nuris Higueras is self-employed. She owns a restaurant in downtown Havana that attracts a large clientele, including visitors from the U.S. She invited CGTN to talk about the latest news regarding the private sector at her restaurant, which is currently closed because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
I've owned this restaurant for the past 10 years, which is part of a family business we started in 1998. In 2010, a larger opening of self-employment allowed me to have my own restaurant.
Higuera says that the just announced measures opening up the private sector are a positive step.
I think this move has recognized the importance of the private sector, and particularly these sectors which can help improve the country's domestic economy.
More than 600,000 Cubans work in the private sector, 13% of the country's labor, mainly in the areas of tourism, transportation, and other services. The private sector's expansion comes amid economic tensions caused by the COVID-19 spread and tough U.S. sanctions imposed over the past few years. Economists here say that the opening of the private initiative will benefit the country.
This reveals the fact that the private or non-state economic sector has huge potential to help take the country out of its current crisis. In that regard, it's positive. It will allow all economic sectors to enjoy similar opportunities.
Although the COVID-19 pandemic has forced the total or partial shutdown of private businesses like these ones behind me, at least for now, Cuba continues to bet to the non-state sector as a crucial actor in the national efforts towards economic recovery. Luis Chirino, CGTN, Havana.
And I'll leave it there for the time being. We'll be back at the top of the hour. We'll be looking at cybercrime. An American court has jailed a flamboyant young Nigerian entrepreneur for 10 years behind bars for being involved in a cybercrime incident that essentially saw him siphon something close to $11 million. But what are the trends of cybercrime in 2020 and the expectations for this year? We'll explore that and plenty more at the top of the hour. See you then. For now, back to Hannah.
Thank you so much, Rama. We'll see you at the top of the hour. Now, let's take a short break and return. Laughter proves to be the best medicine during the COVID-19 lockdown in Zimbabwe.
The greatest journeys the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The psychological impact of COVID-19 on individuals has been felt around the globe. This is mainly caused by restrictive lockdown measures, which have compelled people to stay indoors to minimize movement and curb spread of the virus. But Zimbabweans have, however, found an avenue of reducing their stress through comedy and humor. CGTN's Tunisia tells us more.
Zimbabwe is in the midst of another lockdown. The government extended it by 2 weeks as part of efforts to curb the spread of the coronavirus. Many residents in the capital Harare are using humor through comedy to reduce their stress. Local comedy productions are keeping God-knows Chera and his family entertained, and the anxiety of the COVID-19 pandemic at bay.
When you are in a pandemic like this one, it's something that you are not used to, something that is very new to you, and it strains you psychologically and physically. After receiving these messages about COVID-19, you just start to stress. You start to ask yourself, who is next? But when you watch comedy, you start to laugh stress out.
From playful characters that are up to mischief to sticker situations that mirror Zimbabwe's everyday societal realities, the content producers and comedians are helping individuals to reimagine what a normal society will be like without COVID-19.
Comedy, I think it's a useful tool, I think, towards human beings. I think making people laugh, it's really a good skill, and I think being able to do it during this time is really a big thing. And I think I really want to appreciate, I think, everyone else besides us who can actually make other people laugh, especially during these trying times.
Experts believe that humor is an essential coping tool that can help boost people's mental health during the coronavirus pandemic.
We need social bonding, outing, and meeting our loved ones. We are not designed to psychologically to stay away loneliness and to stay separate from the loved ones. So it's very important to keep in touch. Even if you are not physically present there, you can in touch through online and showing your love and care to each other.
Zimbabwe has so far recorded over 35,000 coronavirus cases and 1,400 related deaths. Thuli Shabalala, CGTN.
Your sport news is up after the break. Here's what you can expect. Kenyans taking to hiking and mountain climbing as the popularity of outdoor sport rises.